coordinator for the Indiana Cooperative Development Center. And today we have Sharon Pattee with us, and she's going to tell us all about the food safety and sanitation basics that farmers market managers need to know. And just a little quick background on Sharon. Sharon began her career in public health at the Wabash County Health Department in 2004. She joined the Grant County Health Department in 2006 as a food safety specialist. In 2008, she earned her Indiana Department of Health Standardized Food Inspector Officer certification and moved to Boone County, joining the Boone County Health Department as an environmental specialist. During her duties inspecting housing complaints, she was morally compelled to volunteer, foster, and serve on the board of the Humane Society for Boone County. Due to the lack of county ordinances or due to lack of a shelter. In 2012, Sharon joined the Delaware County Health Department as a food safety specialist and event coordinator. It was her honor to accept the Manufactured Food Regulatory Program Standard Trainer position in 2014 with the Indiana Department of Health. This opportunity to become a retail food specialist with the Food Protection Division happened in 2016, and she's currently in the position. Sharon graduated from Vincennes University in 1991. She currently seeks adventure in her hometown of La Fontaine as a foster failure with her special needs. Oh, American Bulldogs, Daisy and Sassy Calico Scott. So she's a foster mom for her bulldogs. So that's very cute, Sharon. Sharon also volunteers at the Marion Grant County Humane Society. She finds joy with family, friends, faith, local history club members, and her IEHA Wabash Valley chapter family. And that's the Indiana Homemakers Association. Sharon has served numerous terms as the Indiana Extension Homemakers Association Food Protection Committee co-chair, and she is honored to have received the Tim Sullivan Memorial Award in 2012. I do want to remind everyone to just please remain muted during this presentation. If you have any questions, drop them into the chat, and we will have plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. Thank you, and welcome, Sharon.
Thank you for having me, guys. I feel like I've grown up with Deb Tricoli, so this is a huge honor to serve you all today and share a message of food safety from the State Department of Health. So just a joy being here. My goal is to always inspire my local health department inspectors. And I saw that Vanderburgh and Fulton County and Brown County are all on here, and maybe some more. So I just want to share with all the vendors and market and managers just how important that relationship is as we come together. I know that I have gotten great joy and made some great friends at farmers markets over the years. And my favorite ones are the ones where I've enjoyed making friends with market managers and the Humane Society if they're there. So, okay, sharing this slide though may be a challenge. I'm better with food than I am with presentations, y'all. Do I just enter?
Yeah, there should be a forward. Do you see an arrow?
I do not see an arrow.
There's an arrow at the top. See what that does. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, sorry, guys.
Do you see an arrow at the top of your presentation?
The presentation altogether? No, I not. Oh, but at the bottom, I may. Yes, I do. Thank you. You guys, thanks for your patience with me.
Oh.
So here, can you all see the screen? Yeah, okay. So we are here, not like people are like, oh no, here comes the food inspector, but our goal really is to work together with people to promote, protect, and improve the health and safety of all Hoosiers. And if we have people from joining out of state, we'll make you honorary Hoosiers for the day and at the markets. So no matter what we're doing, our ultimate goal as food inspectors are to be out there protecting food and to help you grow your markets, because safe food helps all of us. So building the relationships, people, a lot of times get questions such as, why is the health department involved? Why are there different permits needed in different counties? Why are there different counties? I always love that one. What's the inspector's role, and what's required under the state law or rule? And does the health department really have any right to be in my family's business? Anyway, so I have to say, before 2009, before the what was known as House Bill Senate Enrollment Act 1309 came out, it was illegal to even sell chocolate chip cookies. And so it was a blessing in disguise that in 2009, home-based vendors became a thing, and we've moved forward with that, allowing opportunities for businesses to grow throughout the state. So one of the things I do when I look at my vendor list, and especially as I'm doing consultations, people will use the term cottage industry or market, cottage. If they use the word cottage, that sort of alarms me that we're not looking at the Indiana law and rules that, or the guidelines that go along with home-based vendors. So that's where I start with that, is like, how much have they done their research? So why is that health department involved? Because they're going to just review. And then one of those things, I really love the market managers group before this, when they were sharing, working together, growing that market, because I really do believe that as a regulator coming together to work, when I can trust that market manager to send their vendors to me so that we can sort it out before the market, that's a wonderful practice for all of us, because if I can sort that out for you, that takes the heat off you on market day. It helps the vendors decide how they want to grow as a business. And as a regulator, that alleviates a lot of stress from me on the day of the market. So just building those relationships there. Different permits are needed, not for home-based vendors. We're going to touch on different boxes because so many different vendors attend a farmer's market. So why may you need a permit? We're going to discuss that. And why are there different rules? There's really not different rules for different counties. However, in the state of Indiana, we are a home rule state. And so it might be the same rule, but inspectors in the state may interpret things a little bit different. And I know sometimes it depends on the politics of that county. If they have an ordinance in place or they don't have an ordinance in place, they're limited to what, or challenged by what they may have in place. What is required under the state law or rule? So with home-based vendors, we go by the guidelines. And then if the guidelines aren't met, then it usually kicks it into another area. And then why do we have a right to be in your business? We're here to protect everyone. So working together just helps us as we move forward. So what a lot of people don't realize is Indiana has 92 counties, but we have 94 local health departments, and that changed during COVID. Fountain and Warren had always been combined due to funding. They have one food inspector for 2 counties because they're a small area, or larger area, but they have small smaller population. And so the counties work together in half. But in 2020, the city of Fishers went separate from Hamilton County. And so those are some bigger farmers markets in that area. And I just always remind people, before you cross a border or change a community, check with your local health department. And so that's a prime example there, is the city of Fishers is using the same rules as Hamilton County. They may be interpreting things different, or there may be some challenges there with how you've labeled things. And then East Chicago and Gary are separate from the Lake County Health Department. However, they follow the Lake County ordinance. So all that comes into play when they're looking at those markets. And then the State Department of Health will write the guidelines and interpretations of such, and we pass that down, and we hopefully work together to make that work for everybody. So common concerns that we hear a lot is the health department's going to shut you down, and we're not, Lord willing, we're not. The health department won't let us do something. Contacting the local health department will just stir up problems, and the health department will make us. Anyway, so I just want to relieve your minds as vendors, if you're out there, we all are working together once again to grow your business and to help you be the vendor you want to be, and to help your farmers market be the best that you can be. If we can assist you in growing, that's what we want to do. And so it's made me, there's no food product, let me share this. If you have a dream of a food product that you want to do, We want to help you with that dream. However, you may not be able to do it under the regulations that you want to. So if you contact the local health department, we can assist you in finding the guidelines that best apply to you. So you have a market organizer, the market vendors, and the health department. And so we all work separately. However, you can see how as a family, we can work together better for the best food that we can bring to that market. By starting that relationship, contacting the health department is so vital. And I'm getting calls already. For example, I just had one on Monday of last week, and it was a lady, the health department had came down on her. And it turned out she was of the understanding that as long as BOA, Board of Animal Health, had inspected her meat, she could just show up at any farmer's market without any rules. And so I had to explain to her that, you know, freezer meat does get a food permit because it's a potentially hazardous product. However, you know, if she went through other hoops, there's a chance that she could even like work as a temporary at the farmer's market and make her pork burgers. You know, there's options. You know, you may have to work little, but there are ways to grow your product. And so by just shutting down when the health department said no to one thing, inviting her to come back and revisit that health department to build that relationship and see where she could go and grow means a lot. And so I felt better about that. However, it wasn't the dream she envisioned, but maybe it was something else. And I think that's a lot for a lot of us. Tell them your plans and ideas. Like, if I can support your idea, I want to support small business. I'm not here to shut you down, and none of us are. Like, if we can help you, that's what we want, because it's all about compliance and healthy food in the long run. Get feedback from them. Like, for example, come the fall, everybody wants to do pumpkin rolls. That's the number one, like, the food inspectors out there, they know I'm talking about. Everyone wants to do pumpkin roll with cream cheese frosting. Best cream cheese frosting ever. However, it's a potentially hazardous product, the cream cheese itself is. So if I could recommend maybe not using your own recipe, either having it sampled and tested through labs to make sure it's safe. You know, could you use Betty Crocker? Like, I won't tell if you don't tell that's Betty Crocker in there. Or can you do a jelly roll instead? You're selling 2 for 1. Like, you got the best jelly ever and you just made a jelly roll. Not anybody else might be making a jelly roll at the market. So maybe this was a don't, but it could become a do. And how could we grow that to help you? And then make it a point to understand the requirements related to the food item that you want to sell to the public. So why is it dangerous? Like, not just because I said it's bad and naughty and you can't do that. Like, maybe there's the water activity is going to make a difference. Maybe the chunks, for example, salsa was challenged in 2018. And so the State Department of Health went back and revisited that. And that is something that we do allow if the vendors are willing to either have tested through private labs, or if they are willing to like work with the local health department, bring their own pH meter, calibrate it in front of that inspector, and calibrate and test their product each week and not seal it, like not in a sealed container. But those are ways that we can work together and then maybe allow a product like a salsa that hadn't been used and allowed in the past because it was canned. Your vision. Sometimes great ideas need additional work to get to the market. So a prime example is my mama, who has the best sugar cream pie ever. But the water activity of that pie and most sugar cream pies will kick it out as a homemade vendor product. So what else could she do? You know, like, not everybody has the best chocolate chip cookies. So as an oatmeal cookie, I mean, the market manager said to discuss the fact that like they only allow so many things. So reinventing your product, you've got like 3 popcorn vendors already. Could you be the person that brings the popcorn balls to the party? Looking at that product that you're making, is there a way that you could redo that and even expand your business and grow that market in an area that hadn't been looked at? You may need to do product testing. And once again, that's where the local health department or extension office can help you with phone numbers to get, I believe it's Rhonda and Janice. Purdue, you can any lab, but Purdue's really kind and affordable. And so we can hook you up with those resources so that you're able to get that product testing done ahead of the market season. You may be trying to sell your home-based vendor item as a home-based product. A prime example is beef jerky. Meat products aren't allowed as a home-based vendor. But is that something that you like love so much and that you dream of and have the best recipe for, that you'd be willing to work with your local health department and the Board of Animal Health to become a retailer or a wholesaler. It's not that you couldn't do that product, it just may not be something that you can do out of your home. And you need to be knowledgeable of the requirements. Once again, knowing the difference between a cottage industry product and an Indiana home-based vendor product. Make the difference is work. Types of vendors at the farmers market. So I tell people, know your niche. So as the market managers before mentioned, like there's different areas. And so I always remind people, like, maybe you can't, sometimes I'll have a vendor that'll get upset and they'll be like, well, the cupcake people next to me, that's a legitimate business. It's a bakery that got a food permit, and I may be there inspecting that bakery as a temporary event. And I just may be stopping by your booth to look at it, to review those products, to make sure your labeling is correct. So just know that not everybody at the farmer's market will be treated the same, just because you may all fall in different boxes. And so we treat everybody equally. However, whatever your business is, for example, a non-for-profit, I'm not going to check out the Methodist Church bake sale, but I am going to look at the bakery and review the bakery items for the home-based vendor. Retail food establishments, they can always get their food permits, their temporary permits, check with your local health department for that. Some non-for-profits, and then wholesalers. Sometimes it's a wholesale product. I had a pie baker that started out as a home-based vendor pie, and she grew her business so fast that she ended up wholesaling, being a wholesaler. So you just never know where your dreams will get you in the long run. Permits. So people, once again, it goes back to that, like, well, this county does this and that county does that. It comes down to basically the fact that they're following their county ordinance. And that county is fortunate enough to have an inspection team that's willing to like go out and help your farmers market. So that county ordinance is set up by the local commissioners, and the inspection team may be at the mercy of whatever that ordinance is. I know one of our counties has one that dates back to 1976. So if the county ordinance says that like they have to go out every weekend to the farmer's market, they may be obligated to do that, or they may choose to do that, or they may be told like you can only go out once because you have other businesses that need more help. So just know that they're honoring their ordinance, whatever that inspection team's able to do. The fee for the food permits, once again, is set up by that county. And then a permit must be obtained but look at that, because sometimes freezer meats, that's a prime example. Freezer meat's regulated by the Board of Animal Health. However, the local county health department may inspect wherever you store that, your commissary where the freezer meat's stored, or if you're bringing it straight from the meat locker to the farmer's market, that may be looked at a different way. Food safety at the farmer's market. So somebody mentioned the liability of flying tents earlier. And food safety, there's nothing like food flying everywhere or hitting the ground. And so I remind people, like, as a dog advocate, somebody once said to me, like, Sharon, like, my tablecloths are stained with yellow stains every time I leave the market. And I'm like, not my problem. However, that food really needs to be somewhere safe and 6 inches off the ground. So I'm here to protect your food, not the tablecloths. But just remember that when you store pumpkins or watermelons, you may want to put them a little bit away from the walking area, just so little kids aren't sitting on them or people aren't leaning on them. So that goes more back to our food produce team that look at those areas a different way than we do. These are ready to eat items. And if you're falling under that $25,000, we don't look at produce like whole and cut produce like they said before. But if you decide to sample it and your local health department allows you to sample it, those are things that we're going to look at, like how the food's stored. Reminding people that on a hot, humid day, that if you are a retail food establishment trying to use a chest cooler for your eggs, raw shell eggs, or you're using the dorm cooler for a cream pie or a cream cheese cupcake, once again for a retail food establishment, those may not hold a good temperature on a blacktop on a midday. It was meant for a dorm, and coolers, like no matter how good your intention when you're opening and closing the lid, a lot of times will not keep 41 degrees or under. So another thing is I see cheese laying out on tables a lot of times, and they've got the ice packets underneath the cheese, but God is beaming down from above. And so that sunlight on the cheese will warm it up faster from the top than the coolness will from the bottom. So just be aware of like all aspects. If you're aware of your food and how it's being transported and how it's being stored, it makes a big difference. Once again, this goes back to your retail food establishments that may be getting a temperature. Make sure you keep it hot at 135 or above, or keep it cold. Sometimes farmers markets allow actual cooking at the farmers market. If that's the case too, like making sure that like the raw meat isn't getting contaminated somehow or contaminating the produce. On extremely hot days, make sure to plan ahead. And for even for food that is shelf stable, you know, a marshmallow or frosting, even though it's not dangerous, can melt down the side of a table. So looking at that and thinking ahead before we choose those items or finding a tarp. So always remember, no bare hand contact with ready to eat foods by consumers or when offering. I think Scott had mentioned like his grandfather sharing that the consumers love to squeeze and touch and smell things. And so just be aware that like if you have an item that people may want to pick up and touch and stuff, that they haven't been washing their hands, most likely at a farmer's market, there's not availability to wash hands. So as Scott had shared, being aware of that. For sampling purposes, even home-based vendors would be required to have a temporary hand washing sink, and we'll cover that in a minute. I tell people if tissue is the issue, so if you got the porta potties happening, or if you're seeing people walking around with Kleenexes, which who isn't it during, you know, sinus season, just be aware that if tissue is the issue, there may not be a place to wash those hands out there. So the sanitizer just covers up whatever's on those hands after the tissue is touched. So by just saying like, oh, I have sanitizing stations, you may want to like, once again, reinforce the hand washing stations for the vendors. I personally would require each vendor to have a temporary hand washing station. However, I know that some local health departments are okay with different vendors sharing depending on the proximity of the vendors. So that is totally up to you guys looking at each situation and determining how you want to do that. I had one farmer's market, the more we thought about porta potties, that was something that they had a sponsor take care of. And health department actually had a preparedness team that rented out those units or bought them for the local farmers market to protect the public. Sneeze guards, and I tell people like, no, it doesn't have to be like the buffet, but you may want to think about how you can protect your cookie jar, like, or whatever you have. Once again, I'm a person that likes to lean over the table. I think a lot of people do. And when people are leaning over, they could be shedding hair. You've got flies, you've got bugs. It's the nature of the beast, you're outside. So unless you're at an indoor market, thinking about how you can protect food, especially if you're sampling it. If you choose to sample, home-based vendors are allowed by law to, as Section 29 discusses, you can sample food. However, talk to your local health departments because some counties choose to allow that and some don't. Because once again, even slicing through a watermelon would make it a potentially hazardous product. So looking into that ahead of time with your local health department is so important so that we can keep everybody happy and safe at the same time. Here's an example of a temporary hand washing station. Once again, this is temporary. Like if I see a restaurant out there doing that, they're in trouble. But I challenge each and every one of you to do the hand washing challenge, which is go to your garage and see how cheap you can make this station up for. I don't want to see people going out unless they really want to go out and spend a fortune on, creating this hand washing station just to make the health department happy. A lot of times you can make a hand washing station out of camping supplies or a coffee urn, but don't plug it in. Anyway, we don't want anybody to boil their hands. But by that challenge, we can promote safety and we have everybody's coming into compliance and working together on that. And it doesn't have to take a lot of space. There's the little ones. We do require this just because water needs to flow down. I've seen some people make the mistake of just having a basin and everybody dips their hands in the sponge, and that's a no-no. We really want that flowing water. But I would challenge you, like, honestly, it's not that big a deal. If you do have to buy some supplies, like, make sure it's limited expense. And also, it doesn't have to be so, like, you see that big urn here. It doesn't have to be so unwieldy that, like, you have to lug this huge thing from your house. Also consider the water sources. Where are you going to get the water to go in your temporary hand washing station? Is there water supplied at farmers market, or do you have easy access to water? And then where's the wastewater going to go? Having the market managers look into situations like that before the start of the season is really important. The same with grease, I would say too. If you have somebody frying on site, are they going to remove that grease with them? Nothing down the storm drains. About sampling, so I'm going backwards. Sorry, guys. Okay, so this goes to with if you are a retail food establishment operating at a farmer's market, cleaning and sanitizing. So this wouldn't be for your somebody like your non-for-profits or your home-based vendors. But if you are a bakery or a restaurant that's going to the farmer's market, you get that temporary food permit, and your local health department, unless you bring enough tongs and tissues and they're okay with it, make sure that you have the ability to use a wash, rinse, and sanitize step. Have your sanitizers in place, have your water in place. Some of the counties I know expect to have everything set up when they come. I know other counties that just want you to have the availability to have thought it through, that you have enough tongs to make it through the 3-hour morning. It really does depend on the local health department, but be prepared for this, because I would honor this, like having all 3 of those, having the water. I really, when I was at the Delaware County area, this has been about 10 years ago, I hadn't thought that through. And another inspector just really ribbed me and is like, Sharon, they show up with the tubs, and what are they going to put in there? Rainwater. And so I had like ding, ding, ding. So make sure you're aware of that before you go, and to have your test kit ready so that you can test that, so you're not just lugging bleach. Product labeling. So this is one of the most vital reasons that your local health department will be there. And this will make and break you. I would say if I'm going to eliminate a vendor at the farmer's market, and the day comes and I'm out there doing the reviews and the inspections, and I find out we got really bad labeling or poor labeling or lazy labeling, those are the vendors that I'm going to challenge, and that makes for an unhappy farmer's market day for everyone. So having the product labeling ahead of time, and there's no excuse. I see this with the raw milk vendors. So that's through the state chemist office that you get that permit. But if you do pet food, such as that, even they have statements and labels that have to be on those. And I know back in the day, I used to get a lot of, like, the jug was too wet, it was too cold, I couldn't keep my label on. Find a way. And for me and one of the local vendors, we came to the conclusion that they tied a cute little string from the handle of the jug, and then it was always in place. And so it was a little extra work, but once it was thought through, it was sort of cute. So if you can work with the local health department and find ways to do that, instead they're like, your labels are never on these jugs, working through that ahead of time is so vital and so important. On all products, and this would be if you're a restaurant or a home-based vendor, you need that name or address of the producer of the food product, common or usual name of that food product, the list of ingredients, including sub-ingredients. So if it's jelly, like what the ingredients are in the jelly, the net weight and volume of the food products. And then these last 2 labeling bits are for the home-based vendors. By law, the date on which that food product was processed, and then the home-based vendor statement. And this is in 10-point font. Some of my counties will work with you on this and some won't. And so just sure, I'm a stickler for, this is how you get to be a Section 29 home-based vendor. And it says, word for word, this product is home produced and processed, and the production area has not been inspected by the State Department of Health. There's no shame in this. This gets your product to market. If you're somebody like me that has a cat and dog, I know my cat's been in the litter box, and I know very well that she could be up on the counter right at this moment. I'm not in the kitchen. I don't know what she's doing in the kitchen. So as a home-based vendor, you are like shedding the responsibility. The health department's not going to get involved in your business if you've labeled right and you're practicing proper sanitation. Unless there's a complaint, it's not labeled, or there's poor sanitation on site, you should be good to go and using products that home-based vendors are allowed to use. So this is, once again, for those of you that may be a local business, but it's also important, I think, for non-for-profits and for home-based vendors to remember symptoms of being ill. And we've gotten so used to the whole COVID thing that there are other things that are carried through food that I'm more concerned about at any given day, because we don't want to have to run to that porta potty in the heat of the sun. So let's keep her all safe. And vomiting, diarrhea, sore throat with a fever, open running sores and cuts, and jaundice are things that I would look at before I go to the farmer's market for a variety of reasons. And then if you are a business, you're required by law to have an employee health policy. And the diseases there to be aware of are hepatitis A, ABC, always A for food workers, E. coli, norovirus, salmonella, and shigella. Be alert for volunteers and employees that may not be feeling well. Like, pregnancy is not going to be, you're not going to get pregnant through the water. However, you may get sick if somebody's touching your food with their bare hands. So being aware of who's sick at what times and what's going on. You may not want to expose yourself, let alone your customers, to somebody that's ill at the market. Don't forget. So once again, we are friendly. We are user friendly. I don't know many grumpy food inspectors out there. Like, we all have our days. Like, I especially have my days when I get to the market and things aren't going as well. And I know we're all that way. So having it all prepared ahead of time is so lovely. Give us a call. We're here to help you. We can help you sort out products. Like I promised you, my phone number is at the end. I love a good, like, deep dive into what products you're doing. I've got great resources. I don't know everything. And so having Purdue, Amanda Deering has been a great resource over the years. The Purdue Labs, they're there for you as a small business too. So if we can all work together on that. My inspectors love helping it and reaching out to people. And so don't discount them just because they're the food inspector. They are your public servant. We're your public servant. Answer your questions and they can give you these resources. So any questions, you feel free to reach out. We have a whole team at the State Department of Health that can help you, along with our produce people. So Jennifer Coleman and I and the whole produce team work together, along with our friends at Purdue, to help you. So just let us know. And extension, we love our extension friends too. So that's all I have for you. If you guys have some questions.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So one question, Sharon, are there new HPV guidelines every year?
No. So for example, there's some, every year there may be a House bill out there that may or may not pass. For example, there is one like coasting the waves right now. And there's been some work groups that have worked through that and through some things, but nothing's passed. And so I always tell my inspectors and my vendors, like, until that gets in place, because a lot of times it may pass 1 year and take a year to get the guidelines in place and get all the kinks worked out before it comes down to the vendors and the consumers. So just be aware, in the year 2022, nothing has passed, so nothing's changed at this point.
And just for clarification, a bill has to pass both the House and the Senate, and then it goes on for signing. And I believe the home-based vendor law did pass the House, but it is now in the Senate. So it's good. We still have a ways to go before we get any change with the home-based vendor law that was actually proposed last year. So we will keep you.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I always hate to get people's hopes up, because if I start working towards that, like, well, maybe next year, or if we start going that direction, then it sort of worries me, because people read that differently, or once again, get the cottage industry rules mixed up. And so we all hope that bill passes for the sake of the vendors out there. But at this point, it is what it is.
Thank you. All right, next question. I think there is a lot of confusion over this topic, Sharon. why do I have to have a temporary permit in other counties when sampling cotton candy when I don't have to have a food handling permit for it?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. So the certified food protection manager law did change. Oh goodness, let's say it was during the middle of COVID heavy. So I'm going to say that was July of 2020. So that rule changed and it's no longer called a certified food. Like it used to be certified food handler. Now it's a certified food protection manager. And the easiest way to think of that is you only need the manager in place if you're really dealing with potentially hazardous foods that are, the best way to say it is bloody meat. Like your cupcake people don't need it, your cotton candy don't need it. When that law changed, we've tried to pass that message through, and I don't think communication's been great with COVID and stuff. We haven't been allowed to have the trainings and such that we would have normally had. So we've pressed that message out, and I don't think all counties, I don't know, like I said, it's home rule, and so we try to educate everybody equally, but how that gets interpreted or the changeover in staff in my health departments has been crazy. So just go back and challenge our local health department, be respectful of it, and you're feel free to say, I heard that rule changed in 2020, and pull it up. You can even pull that up on it's in.gov, Indiana State Food Protection, for the State Health Department Food Protection Division. Our site's undergoing some revisions, but it should be there. And once again, that rule would have changed in July of 2020.
So
It also, oh, go ahead.
I think the question is about a whole separate issue, Sharon,
Oh,
because I guess they're at a farmer's market and they're required to have a temporary permit because they're a business, and
yes.
the health department is requiring them to file for a temporary permit to sell at that market. I believe that's the question.
Yes. So I would require that too. Like a temporary food permit's really important because the local health department has to inspect temporary events. Like we have to by law. So if you're a local business and you're selling cotton candy, you have a food permit at your establishment, and then you have to get a temporary permit because you've left your contiguous property. And once you move off to your property to do something, you have to get that temporary permit. Does that make sense? Because it's not part of your routine inspection. So if you moved it out to the sidewalk for a street festival or something, I wouldn't make you get a separate permit. Once you leave your property and we have to look at your temporary hand washing station, that's when you have to get the temporary permit.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
There's another question. Okay, so this has to do with the label on their product, okay. And they want to know why you require the business address on the label, and this has come up before. So the question is, why do we have to have the address? Because of safety reasons, like if it's a home-based vendor and it's a woman, and anyway, let's just go for safety reasons, she doesn't want to publicize where they live, address, city, and state. The question was, can they just put city and state on their label? And we're talking home-based vendors here, Sharon.
Yes. So the reason why Section 29 says address is because of the trace back. You're not going to get inspected. However, we need to be able to trace you back. And so I know that I'm a single woman with a dog and she doesn't bite. So I get it. I would say work with your local health department and see if they will recognize and allow you to just use an email address, and maybe like let them know, like, I'm the one with this business name in case there's a trace back needed. If you're uncomfortable, the local health department may respect that and honor that. However, it's an FDA rule too that a business has to have their address on there for trace back reasons. It's sort of like we were talking about with the produce, like having the name of your farm. I was going to mention, and I think it's so important, like labeling. The other part of that is there may be 3 chocolate chip people at a farmer's market. And Susan, I think, had said like there's 65 vendors. And so I will be at an event and somebody's like, where were those chocolate chip cookies? And I'm like, I don't know which I'm just an inspector. So I think it's really important to grow your business by making sure you're labeled correctly so they can find Susie's baked goods again. So that doesn't have to do with the address so much, but I really, to promote and support small businesses, even if you're just doing produce, make sure you're getting your firm's name out there. Get your name out there so you can grow.
And I understand the protection, you don't want your address out there anymore, but people, the reality is our address is out there. Anybody can Google and find it. So, and like Sharon said, that's for safety and traceability in case of that outbreaks with the hens that she shared. There's another question about the labels, and it's if the home baked item is too small to label, can the vendor only attach the label? So they can't put the label on the item as too small, then can they hand them a card or have a display placard with all the information on it?
So that's an excellent question. So depending on the health department and the venue, I do allow placards, and I think a lot of health departments allow placards if it's item and you can see the ingredients and stuff, and you still are a home-based vendor and making sure they know that. There may be items like chocolate chip cookies in a jar, or you have a plate of something, or mints, like really small mints or something. As long as you have that labeling beside it, check with your local health department. I do know I had one market tell me, like, Sharon, as soon as you walk away, they throw them under the table. And, oh no. So once again, building those relationships and respecting each other and developing that trust. And then if I have that trust, I allow placards. But that's one of those intricacies. It's up to my local health departments to make that choice on whether they have that trust there.
Thank you. So instead of an address, could a PO box work on a label?
I would go back to the local health department. I think some wholesale industries are allowed to do that. I think sometimes the email is recognized. If you're on social media, just like you were sharing, I'm a freak about these things. I do stalk people. If I find out I've got a vendor doing weirdo stuff, I'll stalk them. If I find out they're on Facebook selling stuff that they shouldn't be selling. And so just know, if you're sort of queasy about your address, it is out there. And so the PO box I can't trace your PO box, and it's a federal entity. If I go to your post office, like, they're just going to be like, they might not even give me that information. So just know, honestly, to be safe, I would check with your local health department and see how they're willing to respect that.
Okay, thank you.
By law, it says address. And so just know that's not your food inspector's choice.
Yeah, it's actually just about being able to contact the producer, and in case of the hens outbreaks, to track the hens. The worst is the Hep A, and contact tracing has to occur with that. And if you can't get a hold of your vendors or know, what they sold at market, it's kind of a slippery slope and things can get ugly fast. So the address is there for contact purposes only. It's not meant to be punitive. It's just it's just a safety step for everyone involved. Okay, we have let me ask the question about the label really quickly, and then I'll circle around about facilities. One asks, I remember being told to have the price on the label too. Is that no longer required?
That's never been required by food safety law.
Yeah, the price. So price is required on commercial products. You probably want to post them like on your website, on social media, or on cards, because as a consumer, I have a right to know what I'm being charged and how much I'm being charged for, so I can make a decision if that's a reasonable purchase for me. But it's never not part of the health department or the state health department.
No, if you want to charge $1,000 for your cookies and they're yummy and I had the money, I'd buy them. So like whatever you want to put on there, I leave that between you and the tax people.
I did get a comment some markets require price on products, so that's a market rule. And like I said, it's perfectly fair for the market because people need to know what they're buying. They need to make good decisions. They need to know what's in the products. So just check with the market because that could be one of the market rules and they can set their own rules. Okay, so then let's shift gears. There's one question. We have bathrooms in the park that in the park where we have the market. Do the bathrooms replace hand washing stations? Yes or no? Why?
No, because, so guys, I really need you to think this through, and this is going to gross you out because like, as soon as you see it, you'll like, it grosses you out. So when you use a bathroom and you wipe, you got to touch that door to get out, and everybody else has touched that door before you go out. So even if you're in a commercial bathroom, that's why a lot of us like use your elbows or back out or whatever you do. However, if you got to turn a knob, and it just depends on your park, I would go look at your park facilities. Sometimes they have that serpentine entrance. However, for regulatory entities, so if you have a temporary food permit or you're some sort of regulated a wholesale business or something, it's required by law that you have a temporary hand washing station at your booth. Like, and once again, work with your local health department. Some allow some sharing, but I typically want somebody to be able to turn around and get the egg yolk off their hands. I don't want them to run to the local potty. So for those vendors, I really, number one, if they're temporary, it's required by law. So they cannot use just the local. It's sort of like if your restaurant just said that they only had to wash their hands when they came out of the bathroom and that was the only time, that would be a problem.
Oh, thank you. I hope I got all the questions. Does anybody have any other questions for Sharon?
And I did want to offer up, we are doing and this was another law that came into place within the last 5 years, for anyone doing, honey. So before, honey was a value-added product and didn't have to be sold with a permit. Anyway, if you choose to sell honey, it does have to be labeled properly. However, contact your local health department because they can either get you a retail food permit. You can contact the Department of Health and we could do a wholesale inspection. There's no charge for that. And we can get you up and running, or you can be a home-based vendor. It just has to have the proper labeling. It can't just be the honey bear out there sitting on your table anymore. Perfect. No naked honey bears.
Anybody else have questions for Sharon? Wow, quiet group today.
And you guys feel free, because I didn't go over all the specifics of House Bill, 1309 or Section 29. But once again, go to our in.gov, the Food Protection Division, and we have a PowerPoint there too that you can share with your vendors. And there's one that's not actually branded for the State Department of Health, has the same information that I share with all my food inspectors. And if you're a vendor or a farmer's market that doesn't have that relationship with your local health department, just realize that I know Jennifer from Brown County is on here. She's invited me in to do a training with all of Southern Indiana. And so we are working together to make sure that all the local health departments are refreshed on vendor rules and regulations, guidelines before the market season. And so as we get refreshed, feel free to go on our site and get the same information they have access to.
Sharon, we just got a question asking,
Okay.
Can you describe what proper labeling might look like for honey and what items would be needed on the honey label?
So the honey label would need to say the same things that everything else does. And it's just honey. So if it's just honey and not flavored honey, it's just straight up honey. All you need to do is put honey as the natural ingredient. Make sure you have a weight statement. And if you're doing it as a home-based vendor, it still has to have that home-based vendor statement on there. And I tell people, we have limited staff. However, that wholesale permit allows you to sell everywhere from grocery stores to craft shows. And so while home-based vendors can't get into craft shows, you can only be on the roadside stand or a farmer's market. those items, by getting that wholesale permit, allows you to sell online, at craft shows. My father's a maple syrup person. He has a sugar shack that's inspected by the local health department, and he gets to go to craft shows now. When he was a home-based vendor, he couldn't.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Anybody else? We still have we have a few more minutes. Oh, Anne? I have someone raise their hand. If you'd like to unmute and ask a question.
If they have that wholesale permit that you were just talking about, is that, do they also have to use a commercial kitchen to prepare their baked goods?
The wholesale permit would just be for the honey only, not the other products.
Got it.
So-
Okay.
So the rule says, section 29 says that as a home-based vendor, you can only sell home-based vendor products. Like, you can't be either or. So that is a touchy line. I do know some farmers markets where a home-based vendor can like buy 2 booths, and maybe their child, there's no age. That's another thing too I wanted to mention, guys. We encourage young entrepreneurs. So if you have a child that wants to sell their baked goods, there's nothing that stops them from following the same rule that you would and starting their own business as a child. And if you're not feeling so secure with your child touching people's food, the same works for the state chemist office for pet foods too. I had a father that really wanted his daughter to start a bakery at like 9. And so by working with the state chemist office, she became a dog biscuit baker first. And I hope she went on to succeed as a baker too. So there's options for even children to start their own businesses, and we support that and encourage that also.
Did that help, Anne?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Anybody else? The questions have been really helpful in expanding, the field on what home-based vendors and farmers markets and who can vend at markets. So thank you for asking. Don't feel shy.
We get all sorts of questions. The thing too with maple syrup, all those value added things, the old guidance that we used to use that some of you may be more familiar with has been taken down because the laws have changed a little bit over the last 20 years. However, a sugar shack can still be regulated, and it may still, as long as you have access to water and it's tested water, you can still use that old sugar shack under some conditions. So just know that even though you may be regulated, it's not the same as like having to have a commercial kitchen. I hope that helps a little bit too. Like those of you that are looking at sugar shacks for maple syrup or sorghum or for honey itself, it doesn't necessarily have to meet, like maybe we can do 3 temporary sinks because that guidance is a little bit different for those value added products.
Okay, we do have another, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
We do have another question with regards to nuts harvesting.
Okay.
And do nuts have different laws? I've noticed that produce has been defined as fruits and veggies, but I haven't heard much about nuts.
So nuts and coffee beans are like, there's several out there that like have these, it should be really easy to do. And I think people worry about like, it sounds like manufacturing, but really they can be treated just as a home-based vendor, because it's Indiana state law is behind on allergens. In the retail rule, we do not declare allergens yet. And so it's fine, perfectly fine for you to do nut products at this point. If you're doing a peanut butter is usually regulated, and because it's so thick, and that would be a product that we'd have tested before you could sell it as a home-based item. But yeah, you don't even have to add those allergen warnings. You're still in compliance without them, even though it's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It may not be law, but if you end up sending someone into anaphylactic shock, it could still be liable. Just a warning, because we do have federal laws that cover that. So there is a question about home-based vendors Did you say that home-based vendors can provide samples at farmers markets? If so, could you talk a bit about what requirements apply? I'm curious specifically about sampling fresh produce.
Okay, so if you are choosing to sample produce, like for example, you are doing wholes, once you take that whole product for watermelon or any melon, once you cut into it, it makes it a potentially hazardous food because you might be slicing pathogens through that. And so most counties are going to require you to get a food permit at that time to show how you can wash, rinse, and sanitize that knife and how you can like refrigerate that melon once you've started cutting through it. So those are the sort of regulatory lines that we draw on that. When it comes to sampling, I totally leave that up to and respect my local health departments to determine how and if they allow sampling. There's some places that just are really hard to regulate when it comes to like supplying water so that people can wash their hands. If you're going to sample, most local health departments are going to require that temporary hand washing station. They're going to require you to have some sort of like tongue, tissue, some way to pass that over to them without contaminating them. So can that be a toothpick? If you're sampling dips and stuff, can the vendor put like 5 little pretzel sticks in a baggie and hand it over so that they can sample the dips? And by somebody being there to protect and make sure somebody's not double dipping. So once again, it comes down to monitoring, protecting the food, and making sure no cross-contamination happens. So when I talked about a sneeze guard, once again, it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole buffet sneeze guard, but something I've seen done is a lot of times it may be a little container for a margarine container, and they've cut a circle out of the top so that people can reach in and dip, but yet the whole bowl's not open to contamination. That may seem sort of petty, but you limit the risk of like people wheezing over a whole bowl versus the little hole in the bowl.
And besides checking with your health department, farmers markets can also enact their own rules. So the farmers market can say no food sampling because of,
Yes.
like Sharon said, there's a lot to keeping that sampling product safe. So you may want to consider that. Amanda Deering shared in the chat the contact for having your for pH and water activity testing is Rhonda Taylor at purdue.edu. So we will share that for
Rhonda.
Mhm.
I just want to share, Rhonda is a really wonderful source. And thank you, Amanda, for sharing that, because Rhonda has worked so well with our vendors in the past. Her and her team do great things for Hoosiers trying to build businesses.
Awesome. Yeah, check that out. I'm going to make sure that on our farmers market website that we have Rhonda's contact on there. We have one more question that came up. Can lemonades and iced teas be sold under the home-based vendor law?
Ooh, that's a good one. So these are a little bit of blurred lines, and this is something I would leave to my local health departments. It says that product has to be made in the home as a home-based vendor. So how far do you go with that? Does that tea have to be brewed and put in the cups at the home before it's brought in? We don't allow sealed products, but if you had a cup and put plastic wrap over the top of it, could you go ahead and pour those cups at the house and then bring them to the market without spilling them? Some people would allow pitchers to be made up at the house of tea or lemonade and brought to the farmer's market and poured. My challenge with that was the fact that it's up to the farmer's market, the organizer for this, because this isn't my problem, but now you've got a home-based vendor competing with your temporary food establishment and I'm going to require, if you start pouring stuff, you're going to need that temporary hand washing station, which sort of like once I have activities like that happening, it sort of unblurs the line for me. So depends on the county, whether they want all that to take place in the home. By law, they can require that. By the guidelines, they can require that for Section 29 vendors versus a temporary food establishment it's going to make the lemon shake up and such.
So I guess to piggyback on that, I have seen it's more like the retail food vendors doing that, selling those at markets. But what about children who want to set up a lemonade stand?
Oh my, that was actually a bill that came out of South Bend last year or the year before. Children with lemonade stands, and I think it ended up getting killed. I would say work with your local health department. I don't know any crazy inspectors that are going to shut down a child. We did have a situation. The reason why I know that came out of South Bend was the child went from having a really great lemonade stand to grilling hamburgers on the sidewalk. And so the health inspector was like all supporting small business until she found out the police station had like gave him this large donation, and with it he bought the grill. And then she's like, stop. So we want to be that inspector that's like shutting down businesses. Work with your local health department. I can tell you, like, I don't know any of my great inspectors out there that aren't willing to help a child, show them how to make a hand washing station, or, you know, work with them to do that, make sure the cups aren't landing on the ground and such. So we generally, I think, I can't speak for all health departments, but I think most of my good inspectors out there are willing to work with a child that's willing to do just drinks.
Great, that's a great option then. Thank you. Well, we are at 2:01, and we've got the last session, which is a networking session with Indiana Grown, starting at 2:15. So if anybody has a last minute question, please give a shout out. If not, we are going to wrap up this fabulous session with Sharon.
Thank you, everybody. And just feel free to reach out to myself or any of my team or the local health departments. We all want to help you.
Thank you, Sharon. And I hope you'll all hang in there with us through the last session. We want to connect with market managers. Indiana Grown has a grant to help do some marketing for farmers markets across the state. So tune in at 2:15. Thank you all. Thank you, Sharon.
You are welcome.
Click record. So I have 12:15. Do you want me to go ahead and get going?
Sure.
All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for hanging in there with us for our final session, which is a networking session hosted by Indiana Grown. We have Jana Page, who is the